brilliant Barnabas. Hello, I'm Malcolm Cox and welcome to Tuesday Teaching Tips on the character of Barnabas. One of my favourite characters of the New Testament, perhaps the most neglected of all New Testament characters in terms of preaching and teaching. And why is Barnabas important for us as we think about our preaching and teaching here? Is because of what it says in Acts chapter 14 verse 1. At Iconium, Paul and Barnabas went as usual into the Jewish synagogue. There they spoke so effectively that a great number of Jews and Greeks believed. Jews and Greeks. Barnabas effective to people from different cultures and different religious backgrounds. Effective in Jerusalem and Cyprus and Antioch and various other places. An amazing character. And in a lot of these recordings I do, I focus on practical things and techniques for how to be a better speaker, and that's useful. But in this series, we're going to focus on character and spirituality and why that made him so effective as a preacher and teacher. Why does it say that in Acts chapter 14 that he spoke so effectively? Not just Paul, but Barnabas as well. What made him effective, and I think it's what made him so effective, was his character and his spirituality. We're going to look at that now as we take one episode each week to go through from Acts 4 to Acts 15 and a bit beyond. So join me as we explore brilliant Barnabas. Now we're going to see that Barnabas was human, like you and I. In Galatians chapter 2, Paul talks about a situation that happened in Antioch when Peter went there, Cephas as he calls him here in chapter 2 verse 11. And he says that he opposed Peter face to face because he used to eat with the Gentiles, and then some men came from James, and then he pulled back and would only eat with other Jewish people. Other Jews joined him in this hypocrisy, so that, verse 13, by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. Like that's the clincher in his argument here. My goodness, even Barnabas was led astray. Can you believe that? Is how he's expecting people to respond. Peter, we can kind of understand it. Not good, but we can understand it. But Barnabas. So we see here the strength with which Paul identified with Barnabas, even Barnabas, and the strength with which Barnabas must have identified with Gentile Christians for it to be such a shock that he would pull away to fellowship only with Jewish Christians, at least in this context at this point. It shows us that Barnabas was human. It shows us that, we have to assume that Barnabas was okay with Paul talking about this with the church in Galatia, because it must have been well known anyway. And we know that they were good friends. We know they worked together for a long time, and we know, we'll talk about it in another edition of this, but there was some kind of reconciliation because John Mark got together with Paul again in the future. But that's for the next episode. But we see here that even Barnabas was human. Barnabas made mistakes. It didn't stop him being effective as a preacher and a teacher. Peter must have repented of this. Barnabas must have repented of this. We see that they made significant mistakes. It's not a small, minor error here. It's huge, really, and Paul's right about the danger of the hypocrisy. I think that's helpful for you and I, because as preachers and teachers, depends on your personality, but for me, I'm very aware of my weaknesses. My last sermon was far too long, and I was kicking myself in the last few minutes of it, and all afternoon, and even today, the next day. It was far too long. There are other times I've made more significant mistakes in what I've said and presentations I've done, and I still remember them. And sometimes I was out this morning praying about some of this and feeling that sense of regret and knowing I can't live in the past, I have to live now, but I still feel it. And it's important for me not to hold on to the guilt, but to recognize what happened and improve hopefully next time, but not to get the idea that I cannot be effective as a preacher and teacher because I make mistakes. God understands, God gives grace. If you have preached and taught in error or ineffectively, don't think that your future has to be what those past experiences were. Barnabas made a mistake, but it wasn't the end. He went on to do more very effective work for God. You can too. Put that past mistake behind you. Forget about it. Learn from it, but forget about it in terms of the guilt and regret. At least learn from it and then move on. Like Barnabas, I'm sure, did. Barnabas is brilliant, but on so many levels, but not because he was perfect. No, he was as human as you or I. Barnabas was brilliant because he took strength from God. So what do you think about today's passage, what we've learned today about Barnabas? I would love to know your thoughts. So please leave a message anywhere you hear or see this recording. Leave it publicly so that we can learn from each other, because we learn best when we learn in community. And if you know someone who would benefit from this recording, please pass it on to them. And if you could do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, the like button in YouTube, or leave a review in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'd appreciate that, because it increases the visibility of these recordings. And I do hope that you are inspired by Barnabas, and that you, by adopting some of his character and spirituality, that it'll help you to be as effective as he was in teaching all kinds of people. Until the next time, have a terrific Tuesday and a wonderful week. Take care and God bless.